Good evening and welcome to the Wilson County Historical Museum. Tonight is our third Wednesday Museum After Hours program, and we're going to be talking about a nationally known composer with a Fredonia history, and his name is Thurlow Lieurance. Notice the spelling on that. Thurlow Lieurance was a Kansan who was instrumental in preserving American Indian music. And so we're going to be talking about him, his background, how he got started, his connection to Fredonia, and some of what he accomplished. I'm going to start out by reading the short description, short history that was published in the People of the South Winds book that was published in the 1980s. And it gives a very short overview of him, and then we'll drill down a little bit more in some of the details of his life. Thurlow Lieurance, famous composer, was only 27 years old in 1905 when he came to Fredonia to conduct the municipal band. He had been bandmaster of the 20th Kansas Regiment in the Spanish-American War, serving in the Philippines. Now, the book says that it was the 22nd Kansas Regiment, but my research says it was actually the 20th Regiment, where Brigadier General Frederick Funston led that regiment. While in Fredonia from 1905 to 1910, Lieurance continued his composition work. He had previously composed about 500 songs and piano selections and 3 complete operas. He was also on the staff of several musical publications and was a leading contributor to the Etude, which was the most popular musical magazine worldwide at that time. After leaving Fredonia, Lieurance went to visit his brother Edward, who was a doctor in the Indian Service in Montana. While there, Lieurance visited 30 Indian tribes and became interested in the ancient flute and the dances. Using this as a basis, and after 3 years of work, Thurlow Lierance's composition By the Waters of Minnetonka made him famous as an Indian music composer during World War I. From 1926 to 1945, Lieurance headed the music department of the University of Wichita. Although Lieurance continued to compose, it would be his By the Waters of Minnetonka, which would be played by Glenn Miller, Paul Whiteman, and Lawrence Welk. Thurlow Lieurance died October 9, 1963 at the age of 85, and he's buried in Boulder, Colorado. So that is a brief history of Thurlow Lieurance, but we're going to drill down and find out a lot more about him. This is a picture of him later in life. Obviously, he's not a young man here, but certainly during the time of his professional career. As I said, he was a bandmaster in the 20th Kansas Volunteer Infantry in the Spanish-American War. He was a teacher, performer. He traveled the area in tent shows or chautauquas before residing in Fredonia. He continued playing in the chautauquas and performing in nearby towns while residing here at 405 North 9th, which is the house and the rooms later owned for many years by Hurston Hedrick. For those of you that are not too familiar with the street addresses, this is the several-story house, brick house, that is to the east of the current Methodist Church. So it's the other corner of the block. Lieurance had a brother, George, who also lived here and worked in the oil drilling business. In December of 1911, Thurlow went to Montana to visit his brother, Edward, who was a doctor at an Indian agency. From there, he spent 4 months exploring the Indians in Montana, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington, accompanied by a photographer from the Smithsonian and a researcher with the Field Museum in Chicago. He used an Edison recorder to record over 350 Native American songs and chants, some of which are housed today in the Smithsonian and the Library of Congress. A few years later, he would become nationally known for his Indian-inspired compositions. At the end of his trip to the Northwest, he was involved in a runaway buggy accident, which severely damaged his leg. He spent 3 months recovering before his return to Kansas. He used a crutch the rest of his life. By 1926, he'd become Dean of Fine Arts of what is today WSU, where the music library bears his name. Well, on the local publicity, in December of 1906, the Fredonia Daily Herald headline says, "Thurlow Lieurance achieving fame." So this is just a year after he had come to Fredonia, and this is a little bit of the write-up at that time. In addition to having given to the world many distinguished statesmen, heroes, writers, and other sorts of geniuses, the Sunflower State is the home of one of the leading composers of the day. Thurlow Lieurance, composer of The Way to Slumberland and other songs, is the musical genius that Kansas is lauding at the present day. While born of French parents, he is strictly an American production, as he was educated at the Cincinnati College of Music and registered at the musical institution from somewhere in Ohio. What made him come to Kansas is another story, but Thurlow Lieurance is residing in Kansas today. Well, about a year later, in 1907, the Fredonia Daily Herald's headline says, "Band Concert." The Fredonia Concert Band gave its second indoor concert of the season at the Hudson Opera House last night. The members of the band appeared for the first time in their new uniforms and add much to the appearance of the organization. And as if they ought to play better and with more vigor by reason of their new apparel, they outdid themselves last night and merited the lavish and at times vociferous applause of their admiring audience. Well, before we go on with the rest of that write-up, I want to show you a photograph of the new uniforms and the band. And this is a rather poor copy of this photograph. We do have a much clearer photograph under glass here in the museum. You're welcome to stop in and take a look at that. But this photograph has been posted here in the museum along with a uniform that has been a bit puzzling to me. And I want to share that uniform with you. It looks like this. And the publicity that we have had with it, what we have come to believe was that this was worn by a high school band student. And I'm looking at the size of this uniform, and it looks like it would be for a very young child, and that's always puzzled me. I couldn't figure out how old he was, how small he was. It just didn't quite all fit together until I read this write-up and really studied the photograph. So let's take a look at it again. So take a look right here in the photograph. Here is this young boy, and look at the detail on the front of his uniform. We see that rope swag right there. The other uniforms don't have it, but I believe the boy was wearing this uniform. So he was a member of the band that was the community band that was conducted by Thurlow Lieurance. So that's a pretty cool artifact that we have here at the museum. Now let's get back to the description of the band concert. This was again 1907. The romance Lorelei, founded upon the beautiful German poem of that name and set to music by our band director, Professor Thurlow Lieurance, was one of the most beautiful selections of the concert. Sweet old songs arranged by Lieurance and sung by our band's director, and a chorus from the same organization, was well received and highly appreciated by our people. There are only praises for our band and the progress it has made, and words of commendation and admiration for its excellent director, Thurlow Lieurance, who by last night's concert only proved his ability as a band director, not only proved that, but also as a vocalist of no mean ability, possessing, as he does, a sweet tenor voice over which he has excellent control. On the whole, the concert was the best yet given by our band. So that was 1907. Well, in 1908, in May of 1908, the Fredonia Daily Herald quoted a little write-up that was in the Cherryvale Reporter newspaper. And this is what Cherryvale's paper had to say. Thurlow Lieurance and the Fredonia Band, of which he is conductor, were in the city a short time this morning en route to Parsons to play for the Masons. While in the city, they very kindly favored the Cherryvale people with several excellent pieces while parading through the main streets. The Fredonia Band is one of the foremost bands in the state and are often called upon to play for state functions. They took more time than allowed them this morning. Consequently, the Parsons train had to be held for several minutes, or they would have been playing for the Cherryvale Red Man instead of the Masons at Parsons for the remainder of the day. So this band was based out of Fredonia, was touring around the area giving concerts. I think that's pretty cool. Another little factoid that I think will strike a chord with some rabid KU fans is this notation that was in the December 3, 1908 Fredonia Daily Herald. The article, the little notation, is titled New Music. Fraternity Days March by Thurlow Lieurance. The Rock Chalk Jayhawk KU March by Thurlow Lieurance is on sale at the P.J. Thomas Jewelry Store and the Butin Drug Company. The band will get the proceeds of the sale of this music, priced 15 cents each or 2 for 25 cents. And wouldn't you just love for 25 cents to have 2 copies of the original song by Thurlow Lieurance? So I was just thrilled to come across that. I would love to have further confirmation and documentation of that, but that was what the Daily Herald wrote in 1908. Well, by 1914, Thurlow Lieurance was no longer here in Fredonia most of the time. He was based more out of Chanute, but the Fredonia Daily Herald, the other newspapers locally, were still following his career. And so we get a lot of information from those papers. So 1914, January of 1914, the headline says, Professor Lieurance becoming famous. Professor Thurlow Lieurance of Chanute has gone to the Upper Cheyenne Indian Reservation for the purpose of continuing his studies of Native American music. His mission is the third he has undertaken on behalf of the Ethnological Department of the United States government. The Kansas City Journal discovered him while he was in the city en route and printed the following article concerning him. While the orchestra at the Savoy played Whispering Pines last evening, the composer, Thurlow Lieurance, was busy with the very material process of disposing of a dinner in the grill room. Mr. Lieurance was selected by the government several years ago to preserve the native music of the American Indians. Under the direction of the Smithsonian Institute, he has visited the reservations of the Sioux and Crows and Blackfeet in the far northwest and the Zunis, Pueblos, and other Indian tribes of the southwest. Mr. Lieurance is in Kansas City on the way to the Upper Cheyenne Reservation, which he will reach by going to Sheridan, Wyoming, and there taking a stage trip of 150 miles up the Bighorn Mountains. Now, I think I said this was 1914. Imagine traveling in 1914 by stagecoach. This will be my second trip to the Bighorn Mountains, said Mr. Lieurance. On my last trip, I had the misfortune to be in a runaway on the stage trip, and I was thrown out and my left leg injured. The injury was more serious than it might have been to the ordinary man because Mr. Lieurance is obliged to walk with a crutch and cane anyway. During the Spanish-American War, he was bandmaster of a regimental band stationed in Cuba, and there contracted a fever, which was followed by the paralysis of the leg. Now, just a side note, there is some belief now that what he probably had was polio. That did affect him all of his life. By sheer pluck, he took regular exercise and gradually overcame the disease until he could again walk with the help of crutches. Ever since he has gone about with a crutch and a cane and accomplished all that a man with 2 sound legs could be expected to do. Mr. Lieurance is enthusiastic over his work. The government is at work preserving the native arts of the various Indian tribes, he said. The Cheyennes, for instance, are marvelous workers in beads as well as warriors. The Zunis are the most expert blanket weavers the world has ever seen, and they are silversmiths as well. Each tribe possesses some art, and as the race is passing away, the government is taking steps to see that the evidences of their various civilizations are not allowed to die with them. My work has been the recording of the actual music of different tribes. I use phonographic records, and in order to find the time and the opportunity and the most favorable conditions, I go among the Indians and live with them for months at a time, making friends with them and studying their characteristics in order to obtain their really typical music. And by the way, the music of the various Indian nations differs just as greatly as do habits and traits of character. There is as much difference between the Cheyenne music and the Zuni's music as music of two different European countries. Do any of the American Indians possess any real music, Mr. Lieurance was asked. Indeed they do, he replied. Some of the most beautiful melodies in the world are those of the love songs of the young Sioux warriors. And it goes on to talk about his work with the Native Americans and recording that music, and it was a real influence on him. Let's see, next we come across an article in the Kansas City Star published at the end of 1917 with the headline, "A Kansan Who Has Preserved Indian Music." And it gives a little bit of his origin story. Again, that's published in 1917. 36 years ago, there was born in Chanute, Kansas, a man who seems destined to become a striking figure in American history, or in American music. Little side note here, he was not born in Chanute. He was actually born in Iowa, according to the draft card that he signed himself. Thurlow Lieurance, son of a physician and brother of an army surgeon, cared only for music-making instruments. At 17, he was an army bandmaster, the youngest, it was said, in the Spanish-American War. He returned from Cuba only to gravitate to the western wilds, where he developed an intense curiosity concerning the music and musical instruments of the Indians. After laboriously taking down some of the Aboriginal melodies by hand, he conceived the idea of taking a phonograph into the wilderness. Not for everyone will the Indian sing his strange music, but the young Westerner was engaging, and he knew several tribal tongues. He mixed with chiefs that had never known what mixing was, and he loved the Indian children so well and so sincerely that the squaws were won over. Lieurance wasn't pretending to be their friend. He is a warm admirer of the Indian character and finds that character truthfully reflected in the Indian music. So here's a photograph of him with some of the Native Americans, and obviously music is taking place there. Well, this article goes on to talk very much about his process, about his love of the music and respect for the people. It would be very easy to read these accounts and really question, was he exploiting them, or what were the motivations, what was the real relationship? But the way I read it, he had a deep, deep respect for the peoples, for their unique music, and a real strong drive to record it so that it would not be lost to history. So this music that he was hearing was inspiring him to not only record what he was hearing, but to write some music inspired by the themes that they were sharing with him. And one of his concepts was to put it on paper for an orchestra, in a symphony, an opera. And so he made some efforts in that direction, publishing songs, piano pieces, and some pieces for small combinations of instruments. then he became well known for that genre of music, and there were major singers that came to Kansas City and performed his work. We do have here in the museum, we have a copy of the Manisa, I think that might be how you pronounce it, Symphony Orchestra program. This is one that he wrote, and we're thrilled to have that copy. I think you might be able to find versions of it online, but we have an original copy of that program. Well, he did have a personal life. Thurlow Lieurance in 1918 married Miss Edna Woolley of Kansas City, and she was a member of the same Lyceum company that he was in, and they were going around doing Chautauqua programs and that sort of thing. She was a lyric soprano, and as I said, they were the members of the same company. They had a child. Thurlow Lieurance Jr. was born in 1919. And then in 1920, we see this ad in the Fredonia Daily Herald, advertising an upcoming performance. And then after the fact, we have this review of the performance. Lieurance pleases is the headline. Fredonia voices her appreciation of Thurlow Lieurance and company last night. A highly appreciative audience listened to Fredonia's favorite musician last night at the high school auditorium when Thurlow Lieurance and company gave a recital on, quote, the hidden beauties of Indian music. The entertainment was brought here by the American Legion, who has done much since the organization of the post to make Fredonia a better place to live in. Mr. and Mrs. Lieurance were assisted by George B. Tack, flutist. According to many, the recital last night was a little better, if possible, than the appearance on the Chautauqua platform. Fredonia is never more pleased than when listening to Thurlow. So this was 10 years after he had basically left Fredonia. His base was more in Chanute and Kansas City area, but apparently never forgot the influence of Fredonia on his career and the importance of that. Well, then we get to moving rapidly ahead to 1963, and now we have a little bit of information in his obituaries that were published in Wichita, Kansas City papers, as well as locally. Dr. Thurlow Lieurance, former Wichita dean, dies. He died at 85, musical composer and dean emeritus of the University of Wichita School of Music, and he died in Boulder, Colorado, where he had been living. He came to WSU in 1926 and served as its dean until 1945, and then he moved to Boulder sometime after that. In the Kansas City Star, their obituary says, Thurlow Lieurance, claimed by both Kansas and Iowa as a native son, did for certain make Kansas his base in composing songs based on the American Indians. One of these, By the Waters of Minnetonka, rocketed him to national fame after its publication in 1914. As a boy, Thurlow was interested in music. When he was 17, his father purchased a drugstore in Cherryvale, Kansas, and sought to persuade his son to be a pharmacist. But not Thurlow. The Spanish-American War came along to direct his attention more emphatically to music. And then, as I've said, the Spanish-American War, he was a musician there. He was named bandmaster at the age of 19 in the 20th Kansas Infantry, as I said, commanded by Brigadier General Frederick Funston, and who had seen service in the Philippines. His Thurlow Lierance's musical education began as a child and continued in the Cincinnati College of Music. A series of Kansas towns, Chanute, Cherryvale, Fredonia, and Neosho Falls, remember him with pride and affection as a musician and a teacher. By the Waters of Minnetonka was the magic piece in the career of Thurlow Lieurance as a composer. It was published about the time World War I broke out, and it represented 3 years of effort with many revisions in the process of seeking perfection. Publishers of the song say it has been second only in popularity over the years to The Rosary. 45 different recordings of it have been made. Well, we have a copy of that sheet music, a rather well-worn copy, by the Waters of Minnetonka. And if you look on YouTube, you'll be able to listen to several different versions of this. I also found several on Spotify, so it's out there and easily can be found. There's more information out there about Thurlow Lieurance. Remember his different spelling of his last name than what many people might certainly around this area, might have some different spellings. But that was one of his songs. We have some other sheet music that he has done. Indian Flute Call, and this is from the opera or the symphony that he wrote. Then we have a collection of songs of the North American Indian. And this has about half a dozen songs in it, and The Waters of Minnetonka is one that is in this collection. And then we have from the Dales of Minnetonka, 5 Impressions for the Pianoforte by Thurlow Lieurance. So, Thurlow Lieurance, one of the interesting characters, interesting people that were a part of early Fredonia history. So thanks for coming along with us tonight, and we look forward to sharing more information about a new topic next month. Thank you.